Marc Sholes, welcome to Jewish Money Matters. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Hi, Yael. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
I'm excited. You've been a psychotherapist in New York City for 35 years, and you have a book out, a popular book, Reset Your Romantic GPS, Why You Steer Toward the Wrong Partners and How to Change That for the Better. And so today we're going to talk about the role of our attachment style, which you'll explain soon, what that role is, how that plays in our lives, and how that impacts our relationships and also our relationship with money. As I was reading your book, I kept thinking, our relationship with money is something that comes up in almost every facet of our lives. And it definitely comes up in our marriage. We all know that. And I think your advice on attachment theory and styles will help our listeners both see how they relate to money and how that is being played out in our romantic relationship. So welcome. I'm really thrilled to have you.
Thanks.
And I want to start there because you do say that one of the number one issues that you see people coming into your practice is the struggle of being drawn to certain kinds of relationships and people, but the relationship doesn't work out or it's not fulfilling, and they're just back in the same place. It's like this pattern that they're not breaking. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, wow, this is just like with money. It's like you often date and I give the example to my students. You know how you often date the same person, and you're like, how come that's happening? And then with your money, you often repeat the same patterns. And it's like, well, I wasn't going to do that anymore. And you say it has to do with attachment style. So tell us what that is. What's happening inside of us that's creating these patterns of behavior?
Yeah. Okay. You're absolutely right. By the way, right before I'll get into it, one's relationship with people. I mean, money is also a relationship, and it's a powerful relationship. So I think you're right. We'll see a lot of similarities in one's relationship with money in terms of their attachment styles. So just to the most basic way of just quickly paraphrasing what an attachment style is that when we grow up, when we're born and we're infants and our caretakers take care of us, with attuned enough caretaking, with enough good enough responsiveness, a number of things happen. One is that the infant and the child begin to internalize this sense that what I need from the world is okay because it's being responded to. Needs for self, for regulation, for biological, for hunger, for caretaking needs, all the, for eye contact, all of these kinds of needs that come from the child and the infant, the environment is responding to well enough. So the child first experiences that what I need is okay, and they also begin to internalize that there's something out there and someone out there that's going to relieve me. And so they internalize this sense of security, not only that they're okay, but that the world is also going to relieve, in a good enough way, their discomfort. So they internalize this sense of stability and security and go out into the world in a way where they feel like, they have a life jacket. So they're going to go through the ups and downs of life with this internal sense that they can pretty much anticipate they will be okay. So that is a secure attachment. Okay. Now, an insecure attachment, you can imagine, is the same infant and child who has the same needs, but has an environment in which there really is not a good enough responsiveness, attuned enough responsiveness, or there is just basic neglect. And so a couple of things happen here that's very different. The child internalizes the sense that I'm not okay. There must be something about what I need which is not getting the environment to respond to me. So therefore, something about me is not okay. And the other thing that they learn is they become, because we all have a need for attachment. It's our number one motivation. Without attachment, we We feel like we're going to, an infant is not going to survive.
Right.
So the infant and the child become preoccupied with the other. What can I do, and how can I change myself to accommodate to what the other can tolerate? And so now security, instead of being internalized in oneself, security now and feeling stabilized exists outside the self.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different experience as you go out into the world. Now, the main way of feeling stabilized and secure is through the relationship to the other, but not even what you may need. It's what the other needs. And so you learn to accommodate, right? So security and stability becomes something that has to be created on kind of an ongoing basis. So it's very hard to delay instant gratification for longer term satisfaction when you have this kind of attachment style. And you could imagine that with people, you could imagine that with your relationship with money as well.
So interesting, because that could, now that I hear you explain it so clearly, well, as a parent, now we know how important.
Good enough. It's also good enough. It does not have to be perfect, of course. And we're talking about bad enough too, right? So anywhere in between is generally, it's a continuum.
Right. And we don't know what our attachment style is until we start exploring it with somebody like you. So it's like we're operating on a subconscious script almost.
That is true. It's a language. So our attachment style becomes a language that we learn of how to connect. And so if our language is accommodating in order to connect, that's our language, with how to connect. We just don't all of a sudden start not speaking that language. And it's usually through trial and error. Do you figure out something? There's some way, my way of connecting is not working for me, right? Or it is working for me. And that's usually how people begin to get curious about something going on here that I'm not clear about. And so learning about these styles, and which is something that, attachment theory has become a much more popular a theory, and it's much more available to people if they want to Google it or read about it. As you become aware of these styles, then at least you begin to have a kind of control if you want to try and change it.
Do people tend to, how they say that opposites attract? Do people tend to, if I have an insecure attachment style, I tend to pair up with a secure attachment style person? Is that how, or no?
Yeah, well, that would be a good goal, but that's not usually what happens. Because what happens is a person with an insecure attachment style usually finds somebody who they feel they have to accommodate to. They're usually not drawn to somebody who's attuned. They're usually not drawn to somebody who knows how to meet that person's needs. That would feel unfamiliar. What would feel familiar would be somebody who doesn't really meet their needs, and the person continues to try to get that kind of aloof. Often an insecure attached person kind of is more drawn to more avoidant kind of person, someone who they're trying to get. And if they just get it right, then, the love will come.
Right. I could see them falling for narcissists and this type of types, right?
Yes, for more selfish, kind of self-involved, critical, maybe kind of person. Yeah. And, and a more securely attached person, they can choose a more insecurely attached person. I mean, look, securely attached people are more stable, but they can also, a person may want something with a little more flavor or a little bit more emotional volatility, and they can be drawn to more of a choice. Right?
Yeah. Interesting. So before we get into couples a little bit more, which I do want to discuss, I'd love for you to paint the picture for listeners on how these two attachment styles, secure, insecure, can manifest in our financial lives. Because I'm already seeing there must be some financial implications in terms of our money management and choices we make. Don't you think, Marc?
Yeah, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, one of them being that if our security, and this is going to sound a little paradoxical, but if our security exists outside of us for an insecure attached person, right, it's going to be hard for them to kind of think about long-term kind of satisfaction, long-term growth, long-term saving. They need something now.
Mm-hmm.
So they may tend to overspend, to see, oh, yeah, I need a vacation. I need it. I can look forward to it. I can't afford it, but I'll worry about that later, because that feeling of having that now will feel great for now. And then, of course, they are going to start getting anxious for how they're going to afford that.
Right.
So they don't necessarily look at their checkbook, or they don't necessarily think about the cost of what it's going to be, because there's more of an impulsiveness. And on the other hand, you may get somebody who is consumed with not spending anything, with just saving, because they're so frightened that they may not have,
right,
so that they just want to kind of hoard a little bit, or not live, not take any risk. And anything sort of that gets polarized like that doesn't work well.
Right. So basically, we're looking. The person is looking for that security outside of themselves, and anything that they feel can provide that feeling, whether it be hoarding or will be overindulging. It's almost irrational, right? It's an emotional reaction.
It's exactly. It's not rational, but it's rational if you think about it in terms of it's compensating for some kind of self-regulation.
Right.
The last thing people want to do is feel like that they're sinking, right? So if something leaves them feeling like they're not drowning, even though they're going to feel like they're drowning later. It becomes, there's a compulsiveness to it and a non-rationality to it. And that's unfortunate, because it's, it digs people, it digs the hole bit more deeply, unfortunately.
And there's another layer here that I'm thinking about, like career choices or advocating at work, looking for different opportunities, negotiating, quoting clients, right? Things that really directly impact our ability to earn more. Do you think the attachment style influence those?
I do, yes. Because, so for instance, if you anticipate like that the world is going to say no to you, or if you have shame around your needs based on how you grew up, when you go in for a job interview or you go in for a raise, how able are you really going to be, going in anticipating that it's not going to work out for you? That's going to have an influence how you come across. And of course, it's not objective. You could be doing a fantastic job. You can be smart as a whip. But if you feel shame around asking or shame around your needs, you're going to, all that has to do is the person can put up a little resistance and you're already like, okay, I understand. And the other thing is for leadership jobs, right? For CEO jobs, or just for leadership jobs in general, a person with an insecure attachment is more accustomed to knowing what to do for the other, but not necessarily how to lead. Right? They really need to have somebody to please or to look for validation. And so they're going to usually need to stay in a position where they overwork,
Right.
and and are willing to do that. They could even be underpaid,
Mm-hmm.
so long as they feel like they're needed.
Right. Right. This is so fascinating. Going back now to the couples, you and I both know that money is probably one of the top causes of arguments and discord among
Yes.
couples. When they come to your office and you see that there's constant tension, arguments about money, do you point this out to them? Do you see that it could be from two different attachment styles that are paired up, or something there that's going on? And I guess, what could these couples be doing better? How can they find common ground?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I mean, there are a number of different. Money is a huge issue.
Mm,
It's and one's relationship to money is a huge issue. So firstly, couples come in. There are couples who, there are people who hide, purchases.
right.
There are couples who have accounts that the other partner doesn't know about,
Mm-hmm.
um, and there are couples who fight a lot about how each person handles bills
Mm-hmm.
or choices. So the first thing I try to help couples realize is that they have a relationship to money themselves.
Right.
When topics around money get hot, I usually let them know they're no longer talking about money.
Mm,
They're talking about, how did they get brought? What was money like in their family?
right.
How did their family talk about money? Is there shame around money? Is there anxiety around people of losing money?
Mm-hmm.
So first, we want to help people understand that they have a relationship with money themselves.
Right.
Now you take two people together, and the more they can talk about it, the better.
Yeah. Yeah. I often say the same thing, because we don't know that we have that relationship ourselves. And then we come into a relationship, we don't know the others, right? So, but we don't even know ours. So now you have two relating to money in completely different ways. They have different stories, which might be
Yeah.
related to their attachment styles, and plus everything else they saw growing up at home, at their home of origin. So, it starts with knowing what's your story so that you can even articulate it to somebody else and also empathize with their story.
100%.
Mm.
And
Mm.
and that's ultimately what makes a successful couples therapy is when each person can have some understanding and empathy around the other's relationship to money,
Right. Right. Right.
and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the change now. That was a perfect segue, because we're just talking about couples and they should communicate and develop that empathy. But back to our attachment styles, I know that you have a lot of advice on not just learning what your attachment style is, but also how to change that, how to rewire that, because you claim that it can be changed. So can we get a little tactical here, Marc, and walk people through the process of discovery and perhaps even changing their attachment style?
Yeah. So again, yes, you can change your attachment
Mm-hmm.
style. And yes, you can rewire your brain,
Okay.
so that the
Good news.
unfamiliar, yeah, so that the unfamiliar and the uncomfortable can become more familiar and more comfortable. And look, I have a lot of, I grew up myself with an insecure attachment style.
Did
I was
you?
I was born with a very charismatic but very depressed mother. I
Mm,
was born with a empathic disposition, and I started counseling her at a young age, and that was my way of understanding how to be in a relationship to privilege the other's needs sort of more than my own, and it's kind of got me out of touch with my own needs. And it made me a very good therapist, to be able to be attuned and empathic to others. but I had to learn, my own ways of, changing that kind of attachment style and being drawn to people who didn't need to be fixed or taken care of.
Right.
But of course, that leaves you without your language, and that leaves you without feeling, originally why you were valued. And those are uncomfortable and new experiences to be able to tolerate.
Mm-hmm.
So I know firsthand you can change it. I'm married 25 years. I have 3 kids. It's, but I had some rocky relationships in my day. And so really, it's about becoming comfortable with what's good for you, and letting go of what's familiar but what's not good for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the first thing a person needs to do is kind of question, are these relationships I'm in, are they good for me? Are they healthy? Often a person may really feel that this person's not nice to me.
Right.
They're very critical of me. And yet I'm frightened to leave them, and so the first thing is to notice there's something going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The first thing to notice. And then the way to change these kinds of things, which I write in the book, there are some very simple things you can do that have nothing to do with the relationship at first, but it's noticing your relationship to other things. So it can be noticing your relationship to food, right? We get cravings. So I like to say this line, be brave, ask why you crave.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a craving's a great thing to take a notice of, to take a deep breath, to notice that you're craving. What am I putting on this thing I'm craving? Mm-hmm. What am I feeling emotionally that I feel if I don't get to have this thing, I'm going to feel disappointed or I'm going to feel empty, right?
Mm-hmm.
Begin to notice and be mindful around your relationships to food.
Mm-hmm.
Exercise, right? So insecurely attached people, strangely enough, often dread exercise. The reason they dread exercise is because exercise is about focusing on the self. And insecurely attached people are not supposed to focus on themselves. They're supposed to focus on the other. So there's often a dread like, oh boy, it's going to take me away from what I know. So you have to take that dread with you. You have to do 30 minutes of cardiovascular exercise 3 times a week. You have to do that so that when you do it, what happens is you end up feeling like you've taken care of yourself. You end up feeling better about yourself. And that is a message to the brain. When I'm good to myself, I actually feel better.
Yeah, I'm safe. I'm still safe.
I'm still safe. Exactly. Not only safe, but I'm even safer than I was before.
Right.
The other is 5 minutes of mindful meditation, literally just 5 minutes of focusing on your breath, noticing when your thoughts wander, coming back to your breath, noticing when your mind wanders, and coming back to your focusing on your breath. Why do you do this? For insecurely attached people, believe it or not, just being with the self is something that may be new. And when you can sit for 5 minutes, and it's not so simple, and notice where your mind wanders and come back to your breath, you begin to have an experience that there's a self that can be come back to. And that self is okay. And you literally have an experience of I'm okay.
This is so fascinating because, like you said, you wouldn't think that these things have anything to do, but they bring you back to that which you need to train yourself to be focused on self, not on other. It's fascinating.
Exactly, you're saying it. I mean, you're getting this better than I get it. Exactly, you're training your brain to come back to something that's there. And the same thing for sleep. Put down your phone 1 hour. insecurely attached people go at the end of the night, because they've done so much accommodating and they've worked so hard, are looking for some relief. And so they often scroll through, social media, or want to watch some show that they want some fulfillment before they go to bed. So I'm saying go in the other direction. Put the phone down for an hour before, maybe read, get a good night's sleep. And if you can tolerate, not looking to be filled, and see that you feel better than it when you treat yourself well and in a healthy way, that's the first step in going out into the world of relationships and saying no to something that is not good for you. You need to have some relationship with the self,
right,
to come back to.
Right. Fascinating. And we could already see how this translates into even making better financial choices, right? You're more confident, you know yourself, you know what you want, you know what's good for you, what's not good for you. You can delay gratification, as you said before. You can advocate. It's absolutely fascinating. Now, I want to make sure that listeners don't feel like, oh, I'm at fault here because I have an insecure attachment style, or I've been dealt a bad card. I think the message here is really one of a growth opportunity, right? Can we go as far as to say that, Marc, that we could turn this into some sort of a strength, maybe?
First of all, growing, when getting over adversity is one of the things we can do that makes us, incredibly strong. And so I like to say, look, having an insecure attachment has nothing to do with the essence of the person. Right. Nothing. It's something that was imposed. It's something that was learned, and you learned it in order to survive. You did it to adapt to an environment that may have been subpar. And so it has nothing to do. The tragedy is that, again, it has nothing to do with one's being good or bad.
Right.
And so as you can understand there's a pattern and you can break free from it, there's such an opportunity to be your authentic self, and to give that authentic self an opportunity to be who it can be. And already they're usually insecurely attached people are usually very empathic and attuned. We just need to turn that attunement and empathy back on the self, and be as good to the self as you would to the person whom you're trying to get to love you.
Yeah. And then it can become a real superpower, actually.
And then it's a superpower. Yeah.
I love what you just said, because you just said such a Jewish concept right there, that it's the essence of the person is untouchable. At the essence, there's nothing wrong with you. Yes. And it's such a beautiful idea, because as you were describing the child at the beginning of this conversation, the child internalized that there's something intrinsically wrong with them, but there actually isn't. It's just the circumstances around them made them find that, or interpret life as such. But that doesn't mean that they're tainted, God forbid.
No, they're not tainted at all. That's the language that they learn that would keep them afloat.
Right.
And, it's something that we do until we have an alternative way of being. And of course, I think it's also a Jewish idea that, I think somebody taught me once, we're given like the mitzvahs that are hardest for us, right? So somebody told me once, like, if you go to a store and you don't steal anything, that's no big deal. Right. But if you're a kleptomaniac and you make it through a store without stealing something, you've overcome something. It's not the greatest example, but so when we do something that's good for us, although it may be uncomfortable and unfamiliar, that's the thing that's a good thing.
Yeah.
We get something from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually wondering if a lot of post. Well, I'm not, but I guess maybe I'm thinking of my mother-in-law and that generation of post-Holocaust children. Like maybe there were a lot of people who had an insecure attachment. I mean, that would make sense, right?
Well, that would make a lot of sense. Sure.
Tragically so.
Yeah.
Marc, this has been fascinating. You are in New York City. We have a private practice, but I'm sure you do virtual visits as well. Do you?
Yes, I do a lot of virtual work. Yeah.
Amazing. So the book, again, I want to remind everybody, is Reset Your Romantic GPS, Why You Steer Toward the Wrong Partners and How to Change for the Better. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it anywhere, I'm sure. And where can people connect with you and reach you?
I have a website, Marc Sholes, MarcSholes, LCSW.com. And I also have, on Instagram, I have a Marc Sholes, LCSW Instagram with some positive statements, a couple of ideas that self-affirming ideas, things like that they can follow on that as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Marc, so much. This was so enlightening. I really, really appreciate the visit.
It was really, really nice talking to you. You're very insightful, Yael.
Thank you.